welcome back. The boy's making a video. Haven't made one in probably about a month or so, but today's video is going to be another where I'm just sitting down and I'm just talking. Definitely not what I'd like to do. I'd like to go out in the water and fish, but you know, we're up in Michigan and we still got ice, so we're just gonna have to do other things. I could ice fish, but I'm just not going to. Today's video is going to be just about soft plastics. I don't really know where I'm gonna go. I'm just gonna, as I'm doing this video, I'm just gonna let it play out and do its thing. As you guys can tell, I got quite a few soft plastics, and I'm just gonna go over the ones that I really like to use a lot, and especially during the pre-spawn, the summer, all seasons, you know. I'm gonna start by going by January to December. So we're gonna start with baits I like to use when it's just really cold, and those are usually the days that are just really tough and you can't really do too much about it, and you just gotta fish really slow. So I'm gonna get some of the baits out of the way so you guys can just focus on just the baits that I like in a time where you need to slow down a bit, and because it's cold. All right, I think I got the stuff that I think I got my stuff all organized for the most part, but one bait that I really want to show you guys, this is the Action Innovations Sweet Beaver. This bait is really what my go-to bait is for the winter, and it's because of the really nice action it puts off, which the thing is that it doesn't really put off that much action, which is what you want. In the winter, you don't want a bait that's kicking a ton, because the bass are going to be slow and lethargic, and they're not really going to want something to eat that's, you know, kicking and doing a ton of movement. They want something that they can just get to and just eat slowly. They don't want to work for it. So this is always a good bait, because if you keep these appendages like this, even when you take them, you know, even if you rip them, they're not going to move that much because they're thin, and they don't have like a, you know, a little rivet where they can move a lot. So since it's slow, you know, the bass really like that. I remember last year I went to a pond with a couple of friends, and I mean, the water, I mean, a week ago it had ice on it, very thin ice, and I was using this bait and I wasn't smoking them, you know, but I caught like 3 decent ones. My 2 buddies didn't catch one all day because they were trying to use baits that were a little too fast and too erratic for the fish. So I went to something that was really slow and could just sit in their face and they could eat. That's my go-to bait for when it's just cold and it's tough, which I'm usually going to be throwing that on a 7-foot rod, maybe a little bit longer than that, with medium heavy to heavy with some 17 to 20 pound fluoro. Next bait, for more finesse, I'm definitely going with a drop shot. But drop shot baits, I mean, there's so many that are just really solid. I tried to narrow it down to 2, and I'm actually going to grab another one. You know, I haven't used a drop shot too much during the winter, or just when it's cold, but I know I've gotten bites on the Dream Shot. The Dream Shot's always good. This is a new one I'm going to try out, the Power Bait Flat Nose Minnow. And then also another new one is the Crosstail Shad by Jackal. But drop shot baits are always good because they're smaller, and with fish in the winter, they're looking for something that's going to be smaller, and again, with something that's not moving too much. So with this bait especially, the tail doesn't move too much. It's very subtle and it doesn't go everywhere. It's not erratic. And so the bass are gonna be more attracted to that because they don't want to work too hard to go and feed. So they just want something that's sitting there. Same thing with this bait doesn't really move that much. I mean, it's really just the tail moves a little bit and it's subtle. And these baits are gonna work in the winter and in the pre-spawn. They're just gonna do a really solid job, and they might not catch the biggest fish, but they definitely can. But they're definitely gonna catch you a lot of fish. in the winter. And also another bait to go with that is a Ned rig. I don't use Ned rigs too often because the bottom in a lot of Michigan lakes, you can't really get away with throwing a Ned rig too much unless you got, you set it up like a Texas rig. But once in a while I will throw a Ned rig, and that's always a great bait because just the way the Z-Man TRD stands in the water and it doesn't have any movement is just perfect for those fish to just grab and eat. My next one after that is, I guess I should grab a jig because that's always a good bait. So I'm going to grab a jig. Grab this one that already has a trailer that I like. So this is a Googan Squad juicy jig. This is the 3/8 ounce, and it's got a little trailer on it. And this is the Zoom Super Chunk Junior, I think. Yep. And the thing about this is, with the jig, you can do a lot with the jig. I mean, it's just a very versatile bait. You can do just about everything with it. But a lot of the time, you're going to have to really, really find a trailer that is going to go well with your jig in order to catch some fish, because if you get a trailer that's moving too much, like for instance, if you were to put a Rage Craw on this jig, that Rage Craw is going to go crazy down here, and it's going to just be flapping and just be very erratic. And a lot of the time, the bass aren't going to like that, and they're going to want something that's barely moving and not making a lot of action, like I said. And this is a bait that, or this is a trailer that just is very subtle and doesn't make too much erratic action. It's just very subtle. This is just another bait that really, it puts off nearly the same action as a Chigger Craw. And so that's just another way to catch those fish. And I can't wait to try out these, because they're also, if you can't tell, they're pretty cheap, and that's always a good thing because, buying soft plastics for cheap and when they catch fish, it's always a great thing. And having more options for trailers is also a good thing, because if you just stick to the same trailer and the same soft plastic, you're not always going to get the same result. So those are pretty much all my options for fishing in very cold situations or just very slow. I'm gonna go into like the pre-spawn pattern, because I mean, you can get away with throwing a lot in the pre-spawn. I mean, there's a lot that you can do during the pre-spawn. That's when you got to kind of figure out things, though. That's the time where you could, you might have to fish slow, you might have to fish a little bit quicker, you could get away with throwing a moving bait, you might not. So that's why the pre-spawn is always an awesome thing, because you get to really find out what the fish like during that time, and it's actually not that hard to figure it out. I mean, you can really, if that water's between 50 and 58 or whatever, you can figure out a pattern if you got your stuff dialed in. But I'm gonna grab some baits here. I'm gonna try to be quicker. I don't want to just ramble for 20 minutes, but I might have to. But either way, this should be good. I don't want to talk way too much, but I want to start off with the trailers. These are mostly I think these are all Rage Craws, or I guess Rage Chunks, but I kind of mixed them all into a bag. And like I said earlier, the Rage Craw, they have a different action compared to a power bait and a Zoom. Right here, you can kind of see where it has a little bit of a rivet, and you can kind of tell that it's thicker right on this edge, and that makes it put off a more erratic action, and it's going to be more like this, not so slow and sluggish. And that's more something that you could throw in the pre-spawn. If they're really moving, you could throw it in the pre-spawn, and it's going to be pretty effective. And of course, you can throw that in a Texas rig if you really wanted to. You could throw it on a shaky head or a jig. You can do a lot with those. Next one, Texas rig. I got a couple of them. I'll do this because this is one that's just, it's always been catching fish for me. This is the Bandito Bug. I'm sure everyone knows what these are. And, this is a very solid bait for the pre-spawn, because it's very versatile. You can tell that it actually has the rivets, and it can put off a lot of action, but also if you don't clip the appendages off, then they can be slow, and that's why it's versatile. You can fish it slow and you can fish it faster, and that's what's awesome about this bait, and you can really figure out what the fish are doing with this bait. Sort of the same thing with a rage bug. I mean, it doesn't have the same body as a bandito bug, but it has a similar, the appendages are pretty similar, and you can do just about the same thing. Another bait, or another soft plastic that you can use, is a swim bait. The paddle tail, if you know that they're on that moving bait bite, you could go to, you know, a Caffeine Shad, or you could go to just any sort of swim bait like a Kitech. Always love those. Or like I said, you could use this or any sort of swim bait, and those usually will do pretty solid, because it's, you know, you're mimicking a bait fish, and when you mimic bait fish and just the forages, you're gonna catch some. So that's really what the pre-spawn, that's what the baits for the pre-spawn really work, or that's when they do work. Summer is a little bit iffy. I mean, they could be on all sorts of things. I mean, they might still be on the moving, they might just be slow and sluggish, which a lot of the time, if you fish that one spot, let's say you're fishing a pond or a lake a lot, and you've been fishing like a jerkbait in that same Texas rig, they're really going to get tired of it, and they're going to want something slow. And that's when you got to mix things up. And you know, there's plenty baits and soft plastics that you can go to mix it up and not throw the same thing. So during the summer, the baits that I like to go is brush hog. Brush hogs are just a different sort of Texas rig to throw, and they put a different action. You know, they have a different look to them that is going to be something that could throw off the fish a bit and make them more curious to bite it. You can obviously tell the appendages here are definitely not the same as a bandito bug, but it's something that could really intrigue the fish into biting. With that, drop shot is another bait that is going to work in the summer. If you work it slow, it's gonna work. This is a striking half shell. This is always a good bait. It has a very similar look to the crosstail shad from Jackall. They have that tail that kind of looks the same, but it doesn't have, Jackall doesn't have the same body, the rigid body, but that's always a good bait. But really, just the summer, it's gonna be iffy. You know, you might have a day where they're gonna be on moving baits, and you're gonna have to throw something that's, you know, more erratic. And then another day it could be really finesse and slow, and you're gonna have to downsize like this, or you're gonna have to just throw them off and throw something like that. Then in the fall, it's more fall. I'm gonna be throwing probably a little bit more slow. I'm gonna go back to the Reaction Innovation Sweet Beaver. I'm gonna go to the bandito bug. I'm gonna go to some swim baits or some flukes, because you just got to change it up. You can't just be the same soft plastics over and over. And then finally, in the winter, that's when I go back to that slow presentation, and even a downsized presentation is always good. So the half shell again, the crosstail shad, you know, any sort of drop shot bait that's smaller, like this one. Yeah, that's always going to be a good way to go. But yeah, I try to rush a little bit towards the end because I didn't want to talk for too long. But yeah, those are really the baits that I'm going to be using for every season. Definitely going to buy more soft plastics to have more options and to really figure out what my confidence baits are. That's the thing. You got to find your preference in fishing. You can't always stick to that same bait. You got to broaden your selection of baits, and you got to find out what your strengths are and your weaknesses are, you know. So without further ado, I'm gonna close out this video, leave some suggestions, and thank you guys for watching, and see you in the next one.